Welcome to the First Buck Podcast, where we feature stories about entrepreneurs and the people who support them. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, and welcome to the First Buck Podcast, brought to you by sky'sthelimit.org. We feature stories about entrepreneurs and the people who support them. Today, we're joined by John Simon, an active entrepreneur, creator, and investor in both the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. He co-founded the Greenlight Fund and serves as the chairman of the board for the organization. Greenlight Fund partners with local communities to match unmet needs for individuals and families navigating barriers to economic mobility and innovative nonprofits that have a track record of success elsewhere. The national organization is scaling measurable impact in 13 sites across the country. John is also a managing partner at Sigma Prime Ventures, where he focuses on software-based businesses and disruptive technology businesses, often getting involved in businesses at their formation or earliest stages. Prior to founding the Greenlight Fund and joining Sigma Prime, John was the co-founder and managing director of General Catalyst Partners and founder, chairman, and CEO of Uromed Corporation. John is a graduate of Harvard University, earning a BA in History and Science in Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar and received his MA in Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. So we're extremely excited to have you on the podcast today, John. So much to discuss today, but we have a little tradition around here. We got to find out how you got started. How did you earn your first buck?
Not, unbelievably dramatically exciting. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, Nick, it's a pleasure to be with you and an honor to be with you and your listeners, and, just really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me. First buck, well, I played a lot of tennis when I was young, junior tennis, and then went on to play tennis in college and graduate school and a little bit of semi-pro. There was definitely no chance that I was going to be able to earn a living on the tour or anything like that. So my first buck took advantage of that teaching tennis. And obviously, was, a little bit of a small business person running my own tennis lesson giving, tennis teaching, little mini company throughout high school and then beyond, even in my college years. And that definitely provided not only first buck, but a few bucks to be able to spend traveling and doing things that I wanted.
All right, I love that. So from slamming aces across the tennis court to helping the next generation pick up a racket and get going, tell us a little bit about how you navigated the next step in your career and maybe what were some of the pivotal moments or how you invested in yourself that allowed you to sort of increase how you took risks or increase the scope of your responsibility.
Yeah, so I always had developed a little bit of a vision where what I wanted to do was be involved in creating things and building things from scratch that hopefully would make a difference to people, and both in the for-profit and not-for-profit world. But the good sense to think about, hey, let's do that in the for-profit world, because create a bunch of value that then would give me the resources to invest in the nonprofit world. And so while I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to go about that, I started to see if I could learn a little bit about how people were starting companies. And during college, I worked part-time for a startup biotech company while I was an undergraduate at Harvard. And that was my first opportunity to really see an entrepreneurial enterprise, up close and personal, and somebody that had licensed some technology, from a university setting and was trying to bring that, into society to build a company around it to actually improve outcomes around a particular type of, medical disease. And so that was a wonderful experience. And based on that experience, what I developed a little bit of a roadmap of see if maybe I could get a job in venture capital. And not because I wanted to become a venture capitalist, but because if I got a job in venture capital, helping partners make investments, it would be a mini MBA is kind of how I thought about it, because I could get to see a whole bunch of people who were starting companies, and some people who were doing it really well, some people who were doing it not so well, some people were doing it horribly, but basically learn. And, by watching, chefs in the kitchen, then maybe someday I would start my own kitchen, to use an analogy. And so after about 3 or 4 years in the venture business, at age 27, I probably wasn't ready, but thought, let's give it a shot. And I left my venture firm and licensed some technology that had the potential to improve outcomes in prostate cancer treatment, and created a company called Uromed around it. And anyway, that's how I got going really in my entrepreneurial journey, was first by kind of getting my feet wet, then by watching and learning, and then at a relatively young age, saying, okay, let me see if I can just go for it. And I had earned a little bit of savings so that in my own mind, I could, spend a little bit of the money that was needed to incorporate and take an option on licensing the technology and get going. And, if I wasn't able to recruit a team and start to have success and raise capital, I guess, I would have had to get another job within a year, but I had enough savings, to sort of accommodate that if I lived in a very Spartan way. So I guess that's the way I thought about sort of the very beginnings of starting my entrepreneurial journey.
Got it. Okay, very cool. I love watching the transition from sort of the sporting world to, going into school, then basically taking an opportunity to have a front row seat at, sort of the forging of businesses. And I think being an associate in a venture firm obviously provides a huge amount of opportunity to study companies, study how they take risks, how they find product market fit, how they sell. Those are foundational things that all business owners have to get pretty good at. And then taking the leap of faith yourself into entrepreneurship, 2 feet first. So we earlier learned how you earned your first buck. You're someone that has given a huge amount back. Can you tell us a little bit about why you gave away your first buck and how you started thinking about, efficiently and impactfully contributing back from your own earnings?
Yeah, I guess, I was raised in a family, it was, kind of middle-class American family, great family. My parents were great role models. My dad in particular was a physician and carried a pager around with him. He was the local community hospital, Newton Wellesley Hospital. He was the chief of radiology there. And I really saw, his life was all about giving back and giving to others. And, whenever we would be doing something, but somebody would need him because an x-ray needed to be taken or whatever, he was on call, he'd go to the hospital, take care of people. And he never felt bothered by that. He was, that was what he was all about. And both my mom and my dad were very active about, giving to charitable causes, and kind of maybe drilled into me at a young age that you had your religion, your family, you had your business and your livelihood and the way you were going to, earn revenue and savings and so on. But then there was this other component of how you would give back to the community and make a difference and hopefully make the world a better place. And you could do it through all of that in terms of your family and your work, and your sort of nonprofit or volunteer or giving activities. And so I always kind of got this idea that there was a balanced life, that you don't want to go, so all in on one thing that you couldn't do other things. And so to create a balanced life of impact was a mix of things. And so, from the start, I started volunteering for things, and just how I kind of got started on really wanting to create things in the nonprofit world was that when I was in college, as I was also, working for the startup biotech company on the side, I started volunteering for the Special Olympics. And I was volunteering for the Special Olympics, tossing tennis balls and doing activities and stuff like that. When I got to graduate school, which was Oxford in England, I wanted to continue that. I wanted to continue that volunteering. And there was no Special Olympics when I got to England in 1984. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was something that was so important in people's lives in the States, but yet there was nothing to volunteer for. And so I kind of got this idea: why not contact, a parents group of, kids with that were dealing with Down syndrome and other kinds of issues, and see if I could get hold of somebody that was running a support group or whatever, and say, what if we started activities, every Sunday? And I could get a group of volunteers together, and we could do soccer, they called it football, or we could do tennis, or we could do frisbee or whatever. And we could basically add something to the mix of the experience they were having with their families and their school, and kind of become this third element that was important in their life. And I contacted this parent group I kind of got in touch with, and she thought I was crazy. But we started something. We called it Oxford Sports Group. And first, it was like 20 kids that showed up with parents. And eventually it was several hundred kids. And then over time, we formalized it and called it Keen, a registered UK charity. And fast forward to today, and it serves thousands and thousands of kids a year in the UK, tens of thousands actually, and also has spread to like 6 cities in the United States. And that was because, I got it started and then got a bunch of volunteers, but then successive generations of leadership took it over and built it and built it and built it. And that was kind of my first experience, how, like, just by spending time and trying to create something that wasn't, you could build something that really would make a huge difference in many, many people's lives. And that was also my first lesson in the fact that just because something great existed in one part of the world, didn't mean it was going to exist in another part of the world. And that you didn't have to be an unbelievable inventor to just look at wow, here's something amazing that really makes a huge difference in people's lives. Now I'm living in a new geography. It's not here. What about creating that in my geography? And mechanically, without a lot of leap of faith or whatever, you could do massive amounts of good. But
because it's validated, right?
But that wasn't happening. That wasn't happening. And so that was the first seed in my mind of what ultimately became Greenlight, which I co-founded and chaired the board of that you were referencing 20 years ago, which is now operating in 13, soon to be 16 US cities with a 15-city waiting list, having done 60 things that we brought to cities that weren't in cities, but that really needed to be there to make a difference, reaching close to 1 million children and families a year. Because the whole idea around Greenlight was create this organization that would exist in many, many cities. And in every city, every year, we would basically look and say, all right, what's a real problem or metric around economic and social mobility that is it's a really bad metric and it's not moving and it's not going to move? And then can we find something that had moved that metric in 6 other cities and then greenlight it in our city and make it work? And you can kind of see in that how the lessons from, porting the Special Olympics from its American context to the UK in the form of Keen, and just how meaningful it was to basically look at what was a gap and what was a rung missing on the ladder to opportunity, and then bring something that worked. You can see how that the lessons learned there, kind of have actualized themselves in what is, one of now, I think, one of the most important poverty fighting organizations in the US, headed to even greater scale over the next 10 years. And so I would just say there was the first, the feeling that this had to be part of a good life to try to make a difference maximally as you could. Number one, the willingness to create, number two, and number three, starting with small lessons and then thinking about how those small lessons might possibly make sense to inspire you to create something much, much bigger and much, much more important, which is what we've done with the Greenlight Fund, which of course people can check out at greenlightfund.org. And I know we'll talk more about it, but just wanted to try to answer your question about how it got started and a little bit about the journey.
Well, thank you. There's so many pearls of wisdom in here. We have so many things in common on some of that stuff. I'm excited to dig in even more. So, one of the things you brought up was sort of this importing and exporting of the best ideas. And, you plant seeds somewhere, you water them, you help them grow, and then you take those seeds and you can take them into other places, whether that's lessons you've learned about poverty reduction initiatives in one place and then scaling those across the country. Fascinating and really important lessons there. So let's talk a little bit about maybe, putting on the hat of the next generation of entrepreneurs out there. Many of our listeners are at the very earliest stages of thinking about how to do something in their community, whether in the for-profit, nonprofit, or somewhere in between that today. And a lot of entrepreneurs out there think if they just had, venture funding or just could get that big loan from the bank, that everything would be fine. And what advice would you have for early stage entrepreneurs? What are some of the things they should sort of think about first before they go, well, if I just had a check, I could solve all the problems?
Yeah, I would say, there's a few things. So first is knowing yourself, because, all of us have strengths and weaknesses. And, to know yourself is really helpful, because if you think about what are my strengths and weaknesses as an entrepreneur, and then you might think, okay, who could I surround myself with as mentors that could basically, help me accentuate my strengths and help me deal with my weaknesses. And so thinking about, it takes a village to create something, even if it's a very small business and it's going to be a solo company. So thinking about, first of all, who are some mentors and advisors that I can, get to coach and work with me, and I can form a little bit of an advisory group or a little bit of a kitchen cabinet or, a little bit of a mentorship group. Those folks can often turn out to be investors or, connectors or, help you find talent or whatever. So thinking about, okay, even though this is something maybe you're going to own 100%, you want to build it. But even so, thinking about, okay, how do I wrap some great people around me? So that's kind of like the first thing. And then build a bit of a plan. What do I think I want to accomplish in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year? So you have one foot on the ground and one foot in the clouds in terms of where you're headed. And then the next thing is to really, people think about investment coming before customers or whatever, but I think it's really the other way around. Like you want to engage with customers and somehow, prove demand. Can you get pre-orders? Can you get people to commit? Can you have evidence of demand? And then if you need that loan or those friends and family money, it's just going to be so much more attainable if you've got great people around you, you have a reasonable plan, and you have that customer pull or that customer demand. And a lot of times, I know when I raised money for my company as a 27-year-old, what we did is we found people that we thought were going to be customers of our products if successfully developed. And we basically I spent money on creating a little focus group and creating all these video clips of basically what they thought about the concept and their willingness to use and to pay and everything. And that really, because I didn't necessarily think, investors or people I was recruiting to be the head of R&D or, the head of manufacturing, we're going to totally necessarily believe a 27-year-old with some technology and a vision. But if I could prove that the customer demand was there, and so I basically did all these video clips, and I would show those to potential investors and potential people that were joining to basically build confidence, get involved. Yeah. And ultimately, that made a big difference. I mean, we raised, after some time of proving a bunch of things and developing prototypes and, investing my own money to create and getting people to agree that they were going to join pending funding and so on. But that evidence of customer demand was really important. We raised $1 million or so, which in those days was a pretty good size.
That's a big round back then, yeah.
Seed round.
That inflation is scary.
Yeah, exactly. Today it would be like, like a drop in the bucket for, a safe note or whatever. But at any rate, and ultimately we then ended up raising like $60-70 million before becoming a public company 5 years into the march, and attaining close to a $500 million valuation. But it all started with that first evidence of customer demand and getting those first people to take the leap, which wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yep. So if I summarized it, it would be really, know thyself, answer those questions about why you're doing this, what your motivations are. You talked about building that bench or having that cabinet of mentors and advisors that can be there to give you advice and help you see your blind spots, but also, help you understand where your strengths are, and then engaging with customers. And we have this, that fits perfectly into something we always try to reinforce with our entrepreneurs is your customers are your best teachers. And when you can turn your customers into potentially even investors and advocates and your best and biggest fans, that kind of evidence, that's the kind of thing you should follow as a business leader and founder. So that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you a question, since you've had such an extraordinary career and you recognize the importance of having that, bench around you of people that can be supportive, that aren't always necessarily employees or colleagues. Who was maybe one of the most important mentors for you, John? And like, if you've had more than one, happily speak to those, but like, talk to us a little bit about, that person that sort of gave you confidence early on or helped you, or maybe gave you feedback that was tough to hear, but needed. Because I think many people are quite sensitive to getting feedback today, but feedback is also a huge learning opportunity. And if you can treat it as a way to basically self-improve, it's a great way to get through the hard stuff that you don't always want to deal with. So tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I've had so many. And I think, it's important to have many, because you're going to build your own authentic self and your own authentic leadership, and that's going to be uniquely you. And so if you sort of model too much off of one person, I don't know, that's probably not the best dynamic. So I could pick so many different people that have been and continue to be mentors at various ways at various stages of my life. But to try to be responsive to your question, there was this unbelievable fellow by the name of Bob Swanson. And if you kind of Google him, he was the founder of Genentech, which was a legendary biotechnology company, and pioneered genetic engineering, the whole field of genetic engineering. And this was in the kind of early 80s. And he built a great company. It ultimately was bought by Hoffman LaRoche. And for many billions of dollars, I don't know, it maybe had $10 billion market cap or something. And Bob really envisioned and created this with a team of scientists, and amazing guy. And as he got more and more successful in later life, he started to give back in various ways. And he joined the board of MIT, which is where he had gone to undergraduate school. And while he was based in the Bay Area, he would fly to Boston once a quarter for MIT board meetings. And somehow somebody had introduced him to me. And he kind of resonated with the fact that he had started his own company at 27. I was starting my own company at 27. He took a little bit of a liking to me and the project and the world-changing nature of it. And he decided that he was going to make an investment in Euromed, and that he was going to, every time he came to Boston, reach out to me to see if we could have dinner, and, which we did for years and years and years. And, I was able to get his coaching on how to build and grow a team, how to think about balance in my life. Once we became a public company, how to deal with the pressures of being a public company and quarterly earnings and so on, how to live a full life, and then how to deal with partnerships, because we had partnerships with, Johnson & Johnson in Asia, and then we had partnerships with Astra in Scandinavia, et cetera, and how to sort of navigate all that. And he was just unbelievable and took the time to do that, and really inspiring. And I learned a lot from him. And unfortunately, his life was cut all too short with brain cancer, and he died. I mean, I gotta say he was probably in his 50s somewhere, or late 50s, and which was really a heartbreak, just because of how much more he had to give and do. And even that taught me a lesson that, time is precious, and, get going on doing stuff now.
Yeah, we only pass through this way but once. So
yeah, exactly. So there's just an example of one of many people who were mentors and coaches. And, I found in listening to him, maybe 90% of the stuff he recommended, really resonated with me. And another 10% was like, well, that's your style, but that's not really going to be mine. But that was a good touch point. And so I think the message is, have several mentors, learn as much as you possibly can from them, and soak that up and get them to help you and learn from them. And it's two-way, because they feel great by giving back and helping you, but also, build your own model for the way you want to be.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that story. So Bob Swanson, still leaving an impact in the memory of those that remember him well. So you've hired a lot of people in your career, and you just spoke a little bit about partnership. There are a lot of different kind of partnerships. It can be founding teams, business partnerships, personal partnerships, and then, people that you work with. And I'd be interested to hear, how you think about what it takes to build a good team, and even recruiting or hiring even your first person. Maybe some lessons that you have that you could share would be helpful to hear.
Yeah, I mean, building a team is really important, because you can't make anything happen by yourself. And anything great, requires a significant team. So Greenlight began with just 2 people, and now we're close to a 70-person team with 2 or 3 people leading efforts in every city that we're in, and then a national team of 20 plus people. And nothing happens without unbelievable people that are unbelievably committed to the cause, that share a common value system and share a common approach and vision, and all get behind something and throw themselves into it and make it happen. So building a team is critical. I think, the first thing about building a team is being really clear about where you're headed as an organization. Because obviously, if you're not clear, you might attract the wrong people, or you might attract people that think you were headed in direction X, but because you weren't clear and you really headed in direction Y, they become unhappy, and then like, well, geez, I thought you were headed X, now you're headed Y, so I guess this isn't really for me and I'm leaving. So be really clear about, the culture, the norms, the mission, the value, the path, as best you can, knowing that things always have to be tweaked along the way. And that clarity is going to help you attract the right people, because the clearer you are about, what it means to be X, the clearer the people that are magnetized by X will come and join. So I think it's kind of like my know yourself around an entrepreneur. Know where you're headed and what kind of people you want to attract, and really broadcast that. Like, you
Yeah.
don't want to try to attract somebody that might not be attracted to that, but you think once they've worked here for 3 to 6 months, they're going to love it. No, be like really clear so that they're opting in, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, be really clear about the cultural norms, like, the work style, the work hours, the emphasis on mission and the trajectory. Like, if you're a small company and you're attracting somebody that really wants to be part of a larger company, well, they might have to be that, hey, we're not going to be a larger company for like 7 years, so like, you have to be really comfortable with the size. And just, I think those are, and taking time to do it, multiple interviews, multiple references, two-way references, so that you can do references on them and they can do references on you and your team if they're going to join it, so that you're really, getting people that are committed. The biggest problem is, you're attracting people that don't share a vision, and then there's just too much turnover.
Yep. All right. So be extremely clear, be very, very clear on especially the culture and norms. And then I think the last thing was, patience with the process, so that you're absolutely getting consent from all sides. And it's really everyone going in with the eyes wide open. And so thank you for sharing those lessons. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question. So I thought we'd maybe wrap it up, and then we can do a quick summary. Taking the steps to pursue entrepreneurship can feel really scary or intimidating, especially if you didn't grow up in a family that has business owners in it, or, you don't have any role models immediately around you. So, maybe what tips can you give to our listeners to think about, like, how to manage some of the stress or some of the risk that comes with the earliest part of taking that leap of faith and getting going with it?
I think the first is, having a support system around you a little bit, so that you have, whether it's friends and family, and ideally, people that are supportive, just emotionally, and that you can talk to, and that you can, fight in and things like that. That helps, because it is stressful. It is lonely. If you're running an organization, I know at UrMed, as we grew to about a 400-person company, it's kind of like the bigger we got, the more lonely I got, because everybody was plugging into you for leadership and energy and opportunity, and you didn't really want to confide with somebody on your management team, just like they weren't necessarily going to confide in you. And so, but you had to have that little, support group of, in my case, it was my wife and my friends and people that you could talk at a confidential basis that would sort of support you. So I think that's important, number one. Number two is just to keep balance in your life. So even though, starting a company, I think for me, it was an 80 or 90 hour a week thing or whatever. It was like you were all in on it. I still had the balance of family and friends, and I still tried to work out once a day or play tennis once a day or whatever, and still try to live a little bit of a balanced life that gave me perspective. I think that's important. And then the other thing, just knowing that while you're going to be committed to succeeding, and you're going to do everything you can, that it's okay to fail. The like many of the best, entrepreneurs in U.S. history, had serial failures before successes. Famously, I forget whether it was his first one company, two companies, or three companies that didn't work for Jack Dorsey. And then, here it was, having built multiple unbelievable companies. And so, this is one of the beauties of America and Silicon Valley, and just in terms of a culture setting, that it's okay to try something and fail. As long as you try your hardest, and everybody's trying their hardest, and you're giving it your all, and we're not talking, fraud like Elizabeth Holmes or whatever, but it's okay to fail. And then, because it's in us all, how do you learn from that and get back up and then do something else, whether that's as entrepreneurship, or you say, what, that was too much risk for me. I want to join another entrepreneurial team that's successful and be part of that and get that success. And then maybe 10 years from now, I'll be ready to take another risk or whatever. But to try and fail is okay. It's then, what do you do with that? To turn that into inspiration for, better impact and better results in the future. Like, that's really the key. And so not to, that's the safety net beneath you, that it's, It's not a disaster to fail. I mean, investors, when they're investing in things, everybody wants everything to be successful, but even the best investors in the world, from a venture capital perspective, which is just, it's only a small piece of the capital markets. Friends and family money and loans, as you said, is really a key component of small business generation. Or can you get customers to front pay or whatever? These are all more typical ways of financing. Venture capital is just a piece of it, but even the best venture capitalists with all the advantages, probably if they're investing in early stage companies, probably about 30% of the companies just really don't work out anywhere close to what you hoped. Another 30% work out okay. Another 40% work out unbelievably well. And that's what generates these venture returns. But think about it. They're failing 30 to 60% of their time. The best investors in the world. They have to accept it. Roger Federer, just related, gave this really cool commencement address where he talked about, maybe perhaps being the best player ever. And if you look back at all his matches, he won 56% of his points or something.
Right,
so,
yeah. I love that
basically,
point.
Almost every other point he was experiencing failure. And of course, there were all the matches that he lost and so on and so forth. And so it's in the big picture of the economy, trial and error is what generates, all this economic advance in the US, which doesn't happen as much in other countries, right? And I think that's something, precious and something to be valued.
Yep. Yeah. So in summary, I think, entrepreneurs that are out there, there's an entrepreneur, I think, in almost everybody. If you develop your support system, if you keep a bit of balance in your life, focus on listening to those customers early, test the idea, and then accept that there will be some setbacks and failures may come. And I think there's a principle in, that doctors adhere to, which is always come at everything from a do no harm principle. And that actually exists in the business world too. Do no harm to your customers, to your stakeholders, your shareholders. Things may not work out, but if you give it your all and you work hard on it, you can use lessons to basically take those into the next stages of your career and life. And so, John, thank you so much for all your wisdom today. I feel like we've gone 5 sets and back and forth. That commencement address by Roger was so good. To be the best player in the world and just barely winning more points, over the whole history of his career, allowed him to do that. And then, basically moving on from each one, like you're playing it 0-0 every single time, was an important lesson. I think Michael Jordan talks about all the shots that, he was given an opportunity to win the game on, and how many of those he missed, but, he was given that ball again the next time, and he did win some championships. So thank you again. I think from the early days of being a tennis coach, to still providing so much of your time and your talents, especially through the Greenlight organization. You've built something that's now focused on helping alleviate poverty across America and hopefully taking those lessons around the world. We're very, very grateful for your time, and a big shout out to your mentor, Bob. It was really touching to hear about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Honored to be part of it.
All right, great. At skieslimit.org, we connect underrepresented entrepreneurs with volunteer business professionals for free one-on-one mentoring. We also provide professional guides to all of our members and monthly funding opportunities, all for free. So if you enjoyed what you listened to today, please subscribe and share this podcast. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the First Buck Podcast. Don't forget to join the community of underrepresented entrepreneurs and their supporters by signing up at skiesthelimit.org. Click subscribe, and we'll see you next time.